So, good morning. My name is Simon Parker. I'm the guest editor at Exhibition News. And this is the first of, I hope, many head-to-heads with industry figures that I'm sure will be informative and interesting. Today's guest is Simon Foster, somebody I've known and worked with. So, good morning, Simon.
Morning, Simon. Sounds like a double Simon.
Yes, double Simon. Thank you for coming. And so I've worked with you at UBM, and you've had lots of senior positions within the industry, and have come up through the marketing route, which I want to talk to you about a bit later on. But just for people that don't know, obviously you've been CEO of UBM, both EMEA and also Americas, and then you went and ran Comexposium as CEO in Paris, and I think that's what you now speak 3 languages. Is that correct? So English, Dutch, and French is what I was saying.
I think, yeah, my wife might tell you I speak 3 languages: English, French, and rubbish. But, yeah, I can get by in French and Dutch as well. Yeah.
So, which extraordinary lengths, obviously learning a language, going to live in Paris, and learning a whole load of new stuff. And again, we'll talk about that a bit later on as well. But also now you are, I guess, in the current parlance, doing a plural career, in that you've got a number of interests. You're a non-exec director of a number of businesses. You were also working with UFI, CISO, and also the AEO on their international group, but also doing lots of things beside that. Again, obviously, we'll be talking about that a bit later. I thought we'd start just with that journey, really, and that kind of the marketing bit, because that wasn't really the traditional route, and you're one of not many that have gone through that sort of that career path.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. And you and I have spoken about this before. I'm still a very proud marketer. I really am, and it disappoints me that there are not more marketers that make their way through this industry, because at the end of the day, that's what we do. We're a marketing business. I actually joined from a trade association to work on the IFSEC show back in the late 90s, so at the end of the last century, as I'm often referred to. And yeah, as I say, I'd qualified as a marketer. I was running the campaigns on the shows and then on magazines and other things that we built up. And I really loved it. And people often say to me, well, how as a marketer can you progress? How can you move forward? And I think it is pretty simple, really. I think the first thing is belief. It frustrates me often that marketers are often quieter when talking about what they do, especially when compared to salespeople, who are always much more vociferous and much more vocal about what they do and where their successes are. And in fact, marketers, by the way, not that I have anything against salespeople, but marketers, I think, understand all aspects of what the business is and what we're trying to do. They're not just about campaign management. They're understanding the audience, understanding what buyers and sellers need to come together. So for me, I think they have more opportunity to do more in the industry if they can just talk about that, put themselves forward for that. One of the things that I always remember, a certain person who you and I know very well, who was my boss when I first came over, kept saying to me, could I tell him how big Shell Scheme was and what was Octanorm and how did that work? And what he was constantly trying to get us to do is see whether I could understand more about just marketing. Yeah. It was a bit of a blunt way of doing it, but I think the point was well made. And I think the big thing to do that I always say for marketers, 2 things really. One is be confident and stand up that you know more and you can do more. And then the second is continue to demonstrate and learn about that. Learn about what salespeople do. Learn about what ops people do. Learn about the wider business, because you probably know it anyway, but just show interest and pick that up, and then use that to drive forward.
And you think now with data and customer insight being absolutely central to everything that we do, that that they should be in a great position, and we should see more coming through.
100%. I think it's ironic that we all talk about data being at the center of what we do. It's always been at the center of what we do, and any marketer will know that. Marketing's changed so much from when I joined. I remember when the biggest revolution we had in marketing was whether the risk of whether we should use email rather than physical mail came in. That seems like a strange thing to say now. It makes me feel incredibly old. But I think the core of any trade show business, any B2B media business is about data. And there's two aspects to data. One is knowing who's who, so the people selling and the people buying, and primarily the audience. And then the second thing is understanding what they want to do, the insight into the connections that you're trying to solve.
Yeah.
As I say, that's what marketers do every day. They might not know it, but when you're thinking about who the visitors should be, who the people should be clicking on your website, you're trying to think of that dynamic. Yes, the salespeople go out and sell it. Yes, the event directors use that to deliver new things, and the ops people build it. But that's the key for me in terms of doing that and understanding that. And I think I agree with you. It puts marketers much more central to what we're trying to do as a business. Although, as you can probably tell, I'd argue that's always been the case, but it's just been further strengthened.
So your advice for aspiring sort of CEOs that are now in marketing positions would be what? So be a bit more shouty, I suppose, and probably simplifying it somewhat.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said about, people are only going to believe in you if you believe in yourself. So it doesn't mean you have to be shouty, but it means you shouldn't be shy in coming forward.
Yeah.
I think, wrongly, perhaps some salespeople get a reputation for being more shouty, which is not always true either. So I think it's just, don't be shy, be confident, be believe in what you want to do. And then, as I say, be confident, because marketing is at the essence of what we do. And actually, it's something still to this day that gives me a great grounding. Even now, as I think about the strategies we employed at Comexposium, what have you, yes, we talked about improving sales, but at the core of it was that, what's our value proposition? What are we trying to do? What are the campaigns we're trying to do? Those are all fundamental things you learn about as a marketer.
Yeah. And I've found also that certainly marketeers are far more customer facing than they ever were before as well. I mean, in a way that they were our greatest asset, and we kept them in the offices planning campaigns, as you said earlier on, whereas actually they're fantastic in front of customers. And the conversation is often a lot deeper and richer than it would be, again, with a more commercially focused person.
I think you're spot on. And again, we should be careful not to box salespeople.
Yes, no, you're right. You are right.
Because, again, I'm not negative about salespeople. I always describe myself as a marketer who could sell.
Yeah.
It was part bluff, part true, but what I wanted. But I think your point's well made. I think we've been talking a lot about this in some of the calls over the pandemic, as people really consider what is it that events do? What is it we do as an industry? And whilst, square meters are what deliver revenue for most of us, that's actually not the thing we're selling, as you and I have talked about before. And as marketers well know, what we're selling is those connections. And actually, in blunt terms, the visitor audience or the buyer audience is where the value is. That's what people are paying for. That's what exhibitors are paying for.
Yeah.
And so I think you're spot on. Marketing people with clients are much more able to talk about and learn as well
100%.
About that value that's being created and how that works. So, and I think that, we're all realizing more and more, it's not just about selling square meters.
Yeah.
It's a very effective tool. It's about understanding the problems we're trying to solve for clients and then delivering on those, which the combination of marketers and salespeople is a very powerful way of doing that. So
just changing tack slightly. So I mentioned that you were originally UK based, so EMEA, but I know that business had obviously events and interests around the world. You then went to work in the US, and then you went to mainland Europe. Is an event, regardless, or whether the nuances, and how did you cope with that? Yeah, no, I actually went to Holland first. And then, of course you did. Sorry, yes. While I was in Holland, so I spent 10 years in Holland. Of course you did. It's one of the most brilliant things about this industry is I love the way it's about people. I love the way it's about connecting people. And I love the way it's all about the teams, right? Because at the end of the day,
the fundamental, as I said before, is a trade show, is a list of buyers and sellers. Everything else that we create about it is the magic of the live event, the connections, all of that sort of stuff. So I love the people part of it. I really, really grow from that. What's been brilliant is it's that understanding, that profession, that skill, whatever you want to call it, has allowed me to go all over the world. Yes, I've lived in the US, lived in Holland, lived in France, but I've also been lucky enough to travel almost to all four corners of the world. You know, I've been all over Asia, all over the Middle East. You and I have been to Africa a few times together, been to the US, South America, and met a lot of great people. And the one thing that has consistently struck me is wherever you walk into an exhibition office, it always feels the same. There's always a constant atmosphere, culture, whatever you want to call it. Yes, of course, it'll be different in China than it will be in the UK or in the US or whatever. And there's cultural differences because of the way we, you know, sometimes it's as simple as the way you have life or the way you the way you have lunch or the way you manage the office and things like that. But the fundamentals of running shows are very consistent. And I've seen it time and time again. As was one of the best things about being in Holland was our teams always in Holland were made up of multinational people who'd come to Holland and would join and what have you. So we were predominantly a Dutch team, but we were an international team. And I think anybody who wants to go internationally should not be afraid. Our industry is wonderful for doing that. I've been fortunate enough to make friends all over the world and experience different things all over the world, which I still love to this day. Obviously not traveled very much in the last 12 months. But it's a great thing. And I would say two things again, really. One is, don't worry if you don't feel you want to go international. It's great. There's an awful lot you can do. And I've come home now because one of the reasons I wanted to come home was to do more here. But on the other hand, if you do have an ambition just to go and find out more about the world, it's fantastic. And it's not difficult. Yes, you have to be brave. You know, I think one of the best decisions I ever made was to go to Holland, despite some of the advice people around me gave me, including the aforementioned leader who was asking me whether I knew more about octanol and shell skiing. But actually, it was one of the best things I ever did. It was.
And what approach do you, as a leader, because you went in senior positions in each of those scenarios, how did you approach it? Because I guess there's always that cultural arrogance or the potential for doing that. So, which obviously is not a good start.
It's very simple. The first thing you do is you go and listen and learn. That's it. And you tell people that you're listening and learning. Yeah. And you actually do that because you can't be a leader unless you understand what's going on. You're right. There would be no way. There was a very simple thing I learned. Wang Mingliang, who was a great partner you'll know well in China, who we work with a lot at UBM and still is with Informa. He's a great man. And him and I had lots of disputes about how we took a particular show to China. And it was back in 2003, I think it was 2003, 2004. And very simple example, we had registration. The hall was so full, registration was being done in a tent outside. And it was chaos. Knew it was going to be chaos. And also it was forecast to rain on the second day of the show. And I said, we just can't do this. This is not how we do registration. And he said, yes, it is. And we had a polite argument about it. Anyway, long story short, when I saw the Chinese coming in, it was a very normal way for them to register. It was organized in their way, culturally operated well, and it worked. The international people, on the other hand, didn't, but they still separated and made it work well. That was good, and I realized that was a mistake for me to say that all people had to register that way. It was also a mistake to say that it was ridiculous to have them walking through the rain and I said we had to build a roof. We didn't have to build a roof because what they did was they took 15 of the contractors, gave them all 2 umbrellas each and just walked every single international visitor to the entrance. It's a simple example of saying, if I'd have gone in and said, I don't care what you do, this is our show from Europe, I want you to register in this way, it wouldn't have worked. It was the wrong thing to do. And as you know, I'm a great believer. I don't like the word geoclone. I like the word geoadapt. I didn't invent it. It was Margaret Ma in China who suggested it to us.
I remember.
And it's a simple word change, but I think it's hugely important as that example. So that's also the same when you walk into a team. Listen and learn and be prepared to understand what the subtle differences are, even if the core is the same.
And don't assume. And you speak incredibly passionately and enthusiastically about particularly all the global roles that you've had. And I know and I've seen you relish that, in various geographies. I guess this question is, it's a bit like your favorite child and in a way unfair, but do you have a favorite sort of territory? Do you enjoy or look back most fondly about one particular region, or is it very difficult to choose?
Well, I've got a Dutch wife, as you know, so maybe I've only got one. My daughter's half Dutch, as she constantly reminds me.
Yeah.
No, I love Holland. I really do. I feel very at home there, and I like the way they work. But even the people in Holland will tell you it's not in itself a big exhibition market, but it's a big international. I think, if truth be known, I love working in the States and I love working in China. I really enjoyed discovering Latin and South America. As you'll recall, we had a great journey there as UBM and made some great friends there. And I it was mainly Brazil, but also in Mexico latterly. And I really enjoyed learning about that, learning about the subtle differences and the opportunity for growth, which still remains there, despite the up and downs of the economies and what have you. So no, I would hesitate to say that's my favorite, because I've got probably, I think the nicest thing is I've got lots of stories and lots of happy memories.
Yeah.
Lots of different places in many different ways. And it's, and I always think that's great, right? We work in an experiential industry. It's nice to be able to have experiences yourself.
Yeah. And I think that also the industry is quite a pioneering industry in that, it loves going to places that nobody. I always remember Sandy Angus saying that, he likes going to places that nobody else wants to go, that fear to tread, if you like. And I think, there's a bit of that in what we do. And I think that's what makes the job so exciting.
I often recall to people on that note, that trip you and I had to Nigeria.
Yeah.
Where we've both been reassured how safe it was. And then we had that car full of armed people.
Outriders all the way from the airport to, maybe we were being a little bit oversensitive, but it was certainly an introduction.
Yeah. But it was all safe. And no, I agree. I think, I would never have said I did it, or we should do it just because we're pioneering. I just think it comes natural. I think, again, as an industry, if you think about it, one of the best things about trade shows is they can open up regions, not just for you as an organizer, but for your customers.
Absolutely.
One of the best things about taking shows to China, to Mexico, to Brazil, to the US, has been opening up markets, so pioneering for clients that want to do that and introducing them to new audiences. So it's actually a very natural thing for us to do. As I say, I'm probably not as brave as Sandy in so much as I would just want to go to somewhere where nobody else would want to go. But on the other hand, I think it just comes naturally. It's what we do. And again, I think it's a super interesting to go and see things and meet new people.
So then the more recent things that you've been doing have been with the International Working Group for the AEO. And I was lucky enough to watch both your Look East and Look West webinars. And thought that they were, really interesting. And I think you're lucky in that you have had exposure to a whole lot of leaders from around the world and got their sense of how, this awful year has panned out, but more importantly, how we're going to get out of it. And can you, I mean, that was 8 people speaking, so it's probably difficult to summarize, but if you can, what were the main sort of takings from those conversations?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting group. And I think when we were talking, I think a lot of people from the AEO like to look at that group because it's an opportunity for them to think about how they could go and either work internationally or take their brands internationally. But I think even more, these sessions have also been trying to help us as the UK understand what reopening might like. Because, of course, as you know, we were talking to China where shows have been running pretty much since the early summer of last year. And we were also talking to the States where things have been picking up, and of course Europe and the Middle East as well. I think my two biggest takeaways, one of which was positive and one of which was negative, and in some ways sort of counter, which I think recognizing it. Actually, three. First one was that as shows emerge and this idea of pent-up demand, I think that's true all over the world. And as we go through, of course, we've got to open our events safely and using all the regulations and all the wonderful things we've been doing. But actually, they can get back to running operationally, at least, relatively normally with the precautions we take, which is positive, I think. And they've definitely seen that in China, definitely in the Middle East. It's just emerging in the US, but I think that's positive. I think the two things, though, were around travel, really. I have every confidence that we as a business and our customers are keen to come back and make it work. I don't believe it'll be exactly the same as it was in the past, but I do believe people will come back. But I think the biggest problem will be travel and international travel, because, and I think those were the two things that struck me. One was when we were talking to the guys in China, how stark they were about how slow vaccination is going to take there, and how vaccination in some of the Southeast Asian countries, and which are very important to the exhibition business, could take as far as late 2022, even into 2023 before they get to significant levels. And as a result of that, they were very concerned that borders would be shut. Most people were suggesting that borders either long haul into Asia or out of Asia and vice versa would be shut at least until 2022, which I think was a piece of negative news, if you like, and something concerned me. When we moved to the Look West one, what I was interested by was the talk particularly from the Middle East, where it was Peter Hall from Informa was saying that the events that have run there have had international exhibitors coming.
Yeah,
they've had pavilions attending, and he was positive. And it's obviously positive because the borders in Dubai are open. But he was saying that customers were prepared to go back and quarantine after the show in their individual countries when they were going back. So I sort of two counter things. I think one was, we're going to be, international travel is undoubtedly going to be a sticky thing as we move forward around the world. On the other hand, there are people, when borders open to some extent or another, are prepared to commit to come to shows because they're important, even if it means they have to quarantine. So I think that's my key thing. I think obviously if we're running domestic shows, as many of the shows are in the UK, I think we've just got to get through the restrictions and push on and move forward.
Yeah.
But I think we really need to be encouraging governments, as well as talking about the safe opening and being permitted to run events, is also about that freedom of travel. Yeah. And I think for us in the UK, it's hugely important that Europe opens up, if only between European countries, because the US, and not a lot of people always realize this, I'm sure many people do, but China on its own is bigger than Europe, right? So if you run a domestic show in China, you can do without international, even if international people come and have their local partners exhibit for them. The US is the same. It's big enough to operate on its own. We in Europe, especially when we look at international shows, are not. So I think that's something we need to be aware of. And also look to innovative ways of helping exhibitors when they come, other ways of manning their booths and doing things. I'll be careful because my friends at Rigo do something along the lines of that. I don't want to overplug them. But.
So I guess what you're saying is that it's going to be dependent on geography, sector, international travel. But from what I can pick up, you're broadly confident about recovery.
I am very confident, as are many of the people, independent financial people I've talked to over the last year and what have you, I'm very confident that there will be a strong face-to-face live media industry exhibitions going forward. So recovery will come. I think it will be strong, assuming there's no new virus and what have you. As we move into 2022, I believe that will be strong, and I think it will start in Europe and the UK in the last quarter, maybe earlier, but strongly in the last quarter of this year. And we'll have a long and healthy forward view of running live events. The bit I said earlier, which I think is different, and I actually thought we should have been doing this differently before COVID, so this is not a COVID thing, is we really need to think about data digital, and how those can enhance the value that we offer.
Mm.
I think, put bluntly, if we didn't know it before COVID, we should know it now. But the days of putting as many people as you can into a hall with as many exhibitors as you can and just hoping that they get some value out of it, those have long gone. And, and don't get me wrong, for many years, that's exactly how I and we ran events, and it was good. I think we've got to be much more precise, much more focused on helping people plan their visits. Also, be open to doing things that are not live. You can, if we're bringing buyers and sellers together, then we can do that not just in the live spectrum. So I think we've got to be smarter at the way we're delivering value, and it's not just a rush to recreating virtual events. That's not the thing. It's a rush to making sure we deliver the best value of connecting people and helping them do business. And content, data, insight, and digital tools all give us ability to do that with the live experience at the core of what we do.
Yeah.
And I think COVID has allowed us to do that, not just because we as organisers rushed to do that to try and save some money. Actually, I'd prefer to think about it because exhibitors and visitors still needed to connect. And we are good at doing that. And there are other ways of doing that around around what we do. And we need to continue to drive that going forward. So I think the winners will be people who do that and continue to do that.
Yeah. And do you think then that the physical event will change dramatically, or will we be running, I accept everything that you've said, that, we need that 365 and the interconnectivity and omni-channel, whatever you want to call it. But do you think then that will change the physical model as well?
I think it'll evolve. It's been evolving for years anyway, so adding conferences, adding planned meetings, adding other things. I think, and we were talking about this again before COVID, I think the day of the mega general show, the general manufacturing show or the general construction show, they are probably going to continue to wane. Yeah. Because I think what's more important is the specialist show. That doesn't mean a specialist show can't be big, so I don't think it's a case of scale, but I think it's about how you bring those people together. I am particularly interested in, lots of people call it different things, summit, one-to-one, hosted by, whatever. I think that's a model which again has been with us for a long time, but I think that also is a great way of, that will be a new, stronger emerging model to go forward. But I still think there's a place for trade shows. I really do. Yeah. We've just got to be a bit more scientific, a bit less blunderbuss, and a bit more
targeted.
I was going to say sniper. That sounded like we were trying to kill people.
I know what you mean. Well, look, Simon, that has been absolutely fascinating, as I anticipated it would be. Thank you so much for your time. And I am sure that we will hear lots more from you over the next coming months or so, but good luck with everything that you do. And again, thank you very much for being my first guest. Thank you, Simon.
Simon, thank you. Delighted to be your first guest, and good luck with I'm sure you're going to be an excellent guest editor of the year, and I can't wait to see what's going to come out. So, but
cheers. Thank you, Simon.